The instructor's hand sliced through the air toward her, a blur of controlled aggression meant to intimidate, but it never reached its target. In one seamless motion, her body pivoted, her arm snaked around his, and her other hand locked against the side of his neck. His eyes went wide, not from pain at first, but from disbelief. Around them, rows of men in matching gray shirts froze mid-breath, the desert wind curling through the training ground like it was holding its own. The man's mouth opened, a raw sound rising from his throat, but she held her ground. She did not speak, did not blink. The grip was firm, exact, the kind only someone with years of muscle memory could execute. And yet her expression was unreadable, as though this was not a triumph but a necessity. The others hadn't expected much from her. Not here, not in this place where the word SEAL was carved into the very dust they stood on. She had arrived 3 days ago, quietly, without fanfare. And from the moment she stepped off the transport truck, the atmosphere had shifted, not with welcome, but with doubt. Her frame was lean, almost delicate, compared to the wide, battle-built men around her. Her eyes, however, told another story. Calm, steady, and carrying the weight of things she had seen but never spoken of. It was easier for them to believe she was a symbolic addition, someone placed here by politics or some PR stunt, than to imagine she could outmatch any one of them. They didn't know the smell of cordite still haunted her sleep. They didn't know how many times she had crawled through the thick stench of burning oil and charred metal to drag someone else to safety. She had been in units where silence wasn't a choice, but the only way to survive. Years before this desert training ground, she had been in another kind of desert, one where the air shimmered with heat and tension, where each footstep could trigger an end you'd never see coming. That's where she learned the difference between showmanship and survival. That's where she'd lost her closest friend, Michael, who had died holding a position so the rest of the squad could make it out. She'd carried him in her mind every day since, the smell of his last cigarette still lodged in her memory like a scar. The instructor, broad, scarred, respected, had underestimated her from the start. His voice had carried across the field when he introduced her to the class, laced with a smirk they could all hear. There were no women here, he said, not really, just guests. He gave her the kind of challenges designed to make her fail in front of everyone. Extra laps under the desert sun, heavy packs filled beyond regulation weight, close-quarter drills with the most aggressive men in the unit. She never argued, she never explained, she just did them. And each time, she finished without letting her breath hitch loud enough for anyone to hear. The other recruits watched in silence. Some avoided eye contact, not wanting to be caught between loyalty to their brotherhood and the quiet respect growing for the stranger among them. Others smirked when the instructor singled her out, mistaking her calm for weakness. That morning's exercise had been different, though. Hand-to-hand combat. No weapons. Just skill. The instructor had paired himself with her, making a show of it. His stance radiated superiority, and the men gathered in a loose semicircle, eager for a display. She had noticed the telltale signs before he moved. The slight tightening of his shoulder, the minute shift of weight on his feet. Her mind didn't just process the movement. It remembered every variation she had ever faced, every fight where losing meant someone else wouldn't make it home. When his arm shot forward, she wasn't reacting. She was simply arriving at a moment she had been prepared for long before it happened. Now, with his arm twisted and his balance broken, the instructor's expression shifted from disbelief to something else, recognition. She didn't wrench his neck or deliver a blow that would humiliate him. She held him just long enough for every man there to understand that what they had assumed about her was wrong. Completely, irrevocably wrong. Her grip loosened. He stepped back, rubbing the side of his neck, his breath uneven. There was no apology in his eyes, but there was a fracture in his certainty. She said nothing, but the silence itself spoke louder than anything else. It was the kind of silence that made people reconsider everything they thought they knew. Later, in the mess hall, whispers moved like currents, about her past, about how she must have learned to fight, about why she never spoke of it. None of them knew the truth, and she had no intention of telling them. Days later, the training continued, but the instructor's tone toward her had changed. Not friendly, but measured. He no longer called her out in front of the others, no longer doubled her burdens. Some of the men began to nod at her in passing, small gestures that meant more than words. When they faced the obstacle course together, she noticed something unexpected. Two of the recruits quietly slowed their pace to match hers, not to wait for her, but to run alongside. Her presence in that camp became less about proving herself and more about altering the unspoken rules. She hadn't needed to shout or demand space. She had taken it through action. And though she would leave that place eventually, her time there would remain in the memories of those men, not because she had bested their instructor, but because she had done it without arrogance, without cruelty, and without the need to prove anything beyond what was necessary. In the years that followed, stories about that day grew, as stories do. Some claimed she had disarmed him faster than the eye could follow. Others swore the instructor had admitted she was the best fighter in the group. She never confirmed or denied any of it. She knew the truth, and that was enough. Respect earned in silence was the kind that endured. When she thought back on that moment, she didn't remember the instructor's expression or the gasps from the crowd. She remembered the stillness in herself, the clarity. She remembered Michael and how he used to say that real strength was quiet, like the steady pull of the tide. In that dusty training ground, under the unblinking sun, she had carried that truth forward, and the tide had shifted.